everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Vancouver Real. I am your co-host today, Mike Zaremba, and joining me is my brother, Andy.
Hello. Nice to be broadcasting live again. This is our third podcast of the week, going for the fourth tomorrow with Philip McKernan at 4 p.m., so definitely tune into that one.
Yeah, and we are, as per usual, podcasting here at a float house at 70 West Cordova Street. Floathouse.ca is our website. And if you haven't heard of flotation therapy, it's an amazing therapeutic application that you can use towards, well, basically calming down the central nervous system and the different applications towards mental health, chronic pain, deep facilitated meditation, introspective work, personal growth. There's a whole array of things you can kind of dive into with flotation therapy. So if you want to experience it, if you're in the city, floathouse.ca is our website. Use the promo code Vancouver Real and save 20% on a single float. And what else do you got to say for us?
Well, we have several events coming up this weekend. Like I said, we have Philip McKernan coming on at 4 p.m. for a Facebook Live. You definitely don't want to miss that one. And this weekend, we are doing a screening of his documentary, Give and Grow. He's going to be doing a live screening. That is actually pinned. It's not pinned. Go to the VancouverReal.tv community page under events, and you can find that link there. And he's also going to be doing a live Q&A, so it's a chance for you to really connect with Philip. And Philip's one of those guys who's definitely extremely heart-centered and really wants to bring out the best in you, the best possible version of yourself that you can be. And he really encourages that through authenticity. So check that one out. That's on May 13th. Then the next week, we have our Mindful Mass meditation at the Vancouver Art Gallery. You can go to the Mindful Mass Facebook group page, and from there you can actually see the event we have scheduled on the 20th. And then on the 21st, we have Wim Hof, the Iceman, coming into town.
Yeah.
He's going to be doing a full workshop, which will include the breathwork exercises, a talk, and also cold water immersion. And if you haven't tried the cold water immersion yet, definitely give it a shot. It's a very unique therapy. It's actually more than just like joint pain and joint relief. Like a lot of athletes will use it for that. Wim uses it as a meditation tool, which, when you're in that cold water, it's really difficult to be worrying about whatever else might be going on for you in your life, like paying your bills and your job and that problem you had on the SkyTrain with somebody. It brings you into the present moment. So get ready for that. That's May 21st, Wim Hof at the Nest in UBC. And that event is pinned to the top of our Facebook page. And the weekend after that, we have Casper, and he's coming into town to do a full weekend immersion of the Wim Hof method, which will be a deep dive into that work. So it, again, will include all the cold water immersion and exercises. And he's going to take everyone on a hike through the mountains and just wearing a pair of shorts and teach you how to keep your body warm in sub-zero temperatures. So pretty exciting stuff coming up.
Yeah, lots on the go in May. It's a busy month. And we're excited to dive into another episode here with a good friend of ours who we've been trying to line this up for a while now. We have Nikolas Badminton, who is a futurist. And Nick, first of all, welcome to Vancouver Real.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here.
Awesome,
Finally.
I know, eh?
It's good.
Yeah. And I was trying to think how we originally got connected. It was online. Did someone make an introduction?
Yeah, it was our good friend Colin Easton.
Right, Colin. Yes,
Yeah.
the networker.
Yeah.
From Not a Stranger project.
That's
that he
right.
did.
Yeah, great
really
guy.
Cool. And then we went to Revolver down the street here in
That's
Gastown,
right.
had a coffee, and just kind of like, man, I don't know. We went off for like an hour or so, just diving deep into life stuff and the future and technology and everything, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that was about 2 years ago, I think. It's quite a while ago. And then I came here and tried the floats, and that worked out pretty good for me, actually.
Yeah, man. No, absolutely. And well, just to kind of a little bit of background on you. You're a futurist, and we'll kind of dive into more like what the heck that even means. Like, how do you get that job?
Yeah.
But you spent a lot of time in technology, Silicon Valley, doing different management consultancies, entrepreneurship, things like that.
Yeah.
You do a lot of keynote speaking now. You write different keynotes. You have other companies you're launching and forming. So you have a lot on the go, and you make a lot of appearances on mainstream television. So
that's right.
BBC, CTV, CBC, Global News. Like, when you have a title of a futurist and you're really up on what's happening in technology and how this is shaping and forming our culture and our society and our civilization, it's always a fascinating topic. Obviously, we're a culture that's obsessed with technology. So, But what else can you add to that? Because I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah, for about 21 years, I've spent I spent a lot of time doing strategic sort of consultancy for large companies. I started working in software in the UK, in France as well. I worked for a satellite agency. It's like very futuristic,
cool.
like straight from the get-go, right? But I was building their finance system, so it wasn't that fantastically sexy.
Okay.
But like I went from that into the city of London, didn't really match with the finance world, and then got connected with some great companies that are based out of Boston, Massachusetts. Lots of MIT people, spent a lot of time over there. That mindset and that change sort of really sort of fed in, and I ended up working a lot in Boston and Denver and Dallas, Boulder, Colorado, San Francisco. Worked in Silicon Valley for a while, and this was in the early 2000s, just as that market was about to drop and go horribly
crazy.
wrong. And then, just worked in management consultancy. So, all over the years, I've been a strategist. So now over the past 4 to 5 years, 6 years, been doing a lot of writing, speculation about the future, been very sort of provocative, getting people thinking about what's going on, running events. I started off running events, just running them off my credit card, and just because there weren't any people like talking about cyborg anthropology, I did that with Amber Case, my friend Karis O'Connell. 150 people flew from all over the world to Vancouver. And it was like, wow, something's happening here.
Interesting.
Yeah, and continued, just kept pushing. Even when people weren't like engaging or even paying for these services and whatever. And just kept going. And eventually I was working for a company that it became a conflict. They're a public company. I was writing all this crazy stuff.
Okay.
About technology and psychedelics and all this stuff. And they were like, okay, are you a futurist or are you like our regional director of North America? And I was like, you know what? Like it was written into my contract, I could do it. And it was like, it makes sense. I'm going to go off and do my thing. And once I doubled down in that, really started to find a community that was really interesting. I started a meetup group called Canada Futurists. Now got Vancouver and Toronto chapters, nearly 1,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, started my podcast. Doing more events like Future Camp. There's going to be one of those this weekend. Dark Futures is going to be in its 4th edition this year, and that looks at like the hidden systems in the world. People are hugely engaged, and I love it. And I learn from people every day, and I soak up as much information and just help people to try and make sense.
Sure.
And I've done 26 keynotes this year since January so far.
That's insane, man.
So yeah,
That's
I'm
crazy.
pretty tired, but it's good.
Yeah,
it's good.
well,
Energy.
thanks for carving out this time for
man.
us. Super appreciate it. And I guess man, there's so much there to unpack and get into, but I want to just start with, for people who have never heard of the term futurist before, let's just start with that. Let's break that down a little bit. And when someone says, yeah, I'm a futurist, what does that even mean?
Yeah, so the futurology is the study about the future. It's sometimes called future studies. A futurist is someone that practices the study of strategies that look into how technology. I personally look at how technologies are changing the human condition, right?
Okay.
So, for example, like 10, 12 years ago, Facebook didn't exist. Today, 1.87 billion people are on that. I mean, we're doing Facebook Live right now. That in itself has just like changed the media landscape on its own, right?
Yeah.
Huge amounts of power. The mobile phone, how cities are actually having to digest and process information faster than ever before. Right. How that's all growing. What do those exponential changes mean to the world? So the idea that you can launch something one year that builds off of 20 ideas that's gone before it, and 20 people will build off your idea, and suddenly in 10 years' time, we've got like self-driving cars and AI systems that are doing all the prediction work that humans used to do kind of poorly, but they're doing it perfectly. It's all those things. So futurism is just that idea of like, okay, I can see where we are today. I can see where we came from. Here are the lessons from the past. Here's what's happening today. But like, where are we going? 5, 10, 15, 20? Sometimes I'm asked like, what are we going to be in 2080? That's hugely speculative. To do that, I write sort of science fiction stories. And
pretty much, right?
Basically. But like, am I right? Am I wrong? I look to a lot of other people in the world, like Ray Kurzweil, Alvin Toffler. There's a lot of futurists. There's some really cool guys out of the UK doing some work. I know a lot of people across a lot of different fields. Biohackers, and I know people building the technology, the people that are like sat in like these labs, like doing things like 4 years ahead of time. Crazy. And they give me these little snippets of philosophical discussions about how humanity's changing. And when you do that, you sort of start to form an opinion. And when people engage me, they put me on stage to share ideas and share an opinion. I basically put together a research report and then just in an hour sort of blast them with information and see what they can do. And over the years, with all these different events and everything, I've only ever had one sort of goal, and that's to like blow minds and to make people understand that, you know, everything is absolutely possible today from a technological perspective, but there's a lot of warning signs and things that we need to do to, you know, remain who we are as humans, because we often forget, especially the people building companies or whatever, they forget that for thousands of years we've been the same. You know, we've had the human condition is 6 things. I talk about certainty, variety, significance, connection and love, growth and contribution. These things have been there for thousands of years, and they'll be there for 1,000 years in the future.
Right.
So you've got to put the human condition at the heart of every technological solution you put together. And that, more than anything else, blows people's minds.
Yeah.
Interesting. Before the podcast, you got into just a little bit the big 6, you called them.
Yeah, the Fantastic Six.
Okay, the Fantastic Six.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to maybe break those down, tell people what the Fantastic Six is all about, and we can maybe dive into each of those today.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I started thinking about, I did a guest lecture for Singularity University in their Global Innovation Challenge for Canada about a month and a half ago. And it's like, you know, exponential thinkers, Peter Diamandis, Ray Kurzweil, all the good stuff, right? I was like, yeah, but what does this really mean? And I came up with the idea of like, there's basically 6 technologies that have been kind of in research and development up till this point. Things that have been worked on in like maker spaces and labs and academia that are just really getting to the point of, you know, you can kind of buy them off the shelf almost.
Right.
And the 6 is this. So foundational element of it all is data and big data, as you probably heard. And I spent many years in the data world. So it's the idea that you've got so much data being generated in the world, and you can then tap into the data information, knowledge and ultimately wisdom from that through using other systems as well. And that's like the first pillar of the Fantastic Six.
So is that kind of like looking at like what people are writing, what they're saying, what they're thinking, what they're sharing, what they care about, what they're reacting to, and like extracting these sorts of behavioral patterns out of this data that's constantly being produced every day?
Yeah, so 6 billion people in the world have got access to cellular technology. About 3 billion have got access to smartphones.
Right.
Imagine just those 3 billion alone, just every day, like generating like gigabytes of information, like where they are, what they're doing, the systems that they're using, how they're talking to people, everything, right?
And I guess that gets more elaborate when, you know, you have the social medias come into those planes, and they're actually like being able to like literally have emoticons and like react to things like that. It gets even more in depth into the psychographic of a person.
That's right. I mean, we can have. I'm actually giving a talk in a couple of weeks about the information economy and how we're actually back to hieroglyphics. We're back to like the emojis,
Crazy.
like absolutely communicating exactly how we feel. Right. I know hieroglyphics were a little bit more complex than that.
Sure.
But like, you know, just try this. Go onto Facebook and go to someone's most positive post that they have and put an unhappy emojicon underneath. Do you know what? They'll probably phone you and ask you what's wrong.
Right.
Like, it's kind of like this raw, visceral human thing that we've attached. Emojicons have been around since about 1969. So early, the teletext sort of, teletypewriters, like it was kind of used as a sort of joke between engineers, but it became this thing, right? So it's not just that. That data is just basic level data. We've now got, one of the other pillars is the Internet of Things that I talk about. So 50 billion devices worldwide will be connected by 2020, it says some of the larger manufacturers. And imagine all of these cameras and sensors and everything capturing information, throwing them into the cloud, and all this big data analysis can happen there. And then you put self-driving cars on the street, and that generates terabytes of information every day per car, and you network them. And so they actually think in the next like 3 to 4 years, data is going to grow about tenfold. So it's about 4.4 zettabytes today. It will go to about 44 zettabytes within 3 years, and it will probably exponentially grow beyond that to like 200-300 zettabytes and onwards, right? The cloud. Yeah. So data is that first pillar, and all the other things sort of feed off of that. the second pillar is artificial intelligence, automation, and the Internet of Things is the third one. And I think these three things together, like the data, the AI, and Internet of Things, it's going to be the thing that fundamentally changes how businesses operate, buildings, people, cities, smart cities, roads. I was chatting to someone last week that talked to me about the sheer amount of sensors that they just put in tarmac today.
Wow.
You don't even think about this, right?
Right,
just like information, right? So this growth and this change can make us super anxious, or it can make us super enlightened, or it can like placate us, or advertisers can exploit it and change how we look at the world.
Right.
I talk about 5 companies as being hugely important in today's world, North American companies, right? So back in the day, some of the wealthiest companies in the world, there were oil companies, there were banks, there were like retailers, like grocery stores like Walmart or whatever.
Yep.
And today, the most valuable companies in the world are like Apple, Alphabet, who's like Google's parent company, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook, right? Why? Because data is that new currency. I say that data is the new oil, but it's that raw, crude state that needs to be processed. Data all the way through to wisdom, which is really messy and hard to get to. But they're brokering an ecosystem where all of this is becoming hugely important. And it's hugely important because that's the ecosystem. It's fairly risk-free to come up with an idea that's based on data to build a solution and test something out. Whereas obviously, say if you're doing exploration for minerals or oil, some guys might die in the field or like tapping the well. Sure. It's like, and obviously what we're heading towards is this exponential world where the changes that are coming to society can happen, monthly, weekly, daily, right? These new things like Facebook can roll out a new feature and suddenly the world's changing, right? Google, whatever, right?
Right.
I mean, half of all internet traffic, I think they were saying in the US, or half of all retail purchase in the US is like just through Amazon. Amazon's going to be like the biggest out of all of these in the next few years.
Really?
Yeah. It's going to change everything.
Crazy, man. So yeah, I can totally see how it is valuable to have people such as yourself talking, communicating, sharing information, extrapolating, looking at the trends, looking at the past, bringing it to the future, and knowing what is happening within tech, within data, within measuring, within all this kind of stuff, so that we know what we're getting involved with, and you can actually just help actually share that with people, because I'm sure a lot of people would love to keep this information very private for more profit potentially. Yeah,
absolutely. If you like Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, very big venture capital firm, Netscape, the early internet.
Sure.
I love the quote from him, right? The internet is a magic box. Like, don't worry about what goes on in the internet. Just use the internet, right? And it's like that secret. If you look at all these companies, like, just use it. It's great. It's free. Everything's perfect.
Right.
I think there's again, I'm doing a presentation in a couple of weeks. So I pulled out all the dimensions by which you can be analyzed by on Facebook. Something like 95 different dimensions of analysis.
Wow.
They can work out your life stage, how many credit cards you have. From that, they can even work out like credit ratings. And this is just extrapolating information from the things that you're doing in your life, the behavior that you're pumping into their system, right? So I find it hugely interesting, right, that we're in this world.
Yeah, one thing I find really interesting too is like how they can actually like pinpoint so much about your personality through that data, right? And then they're going to be basically funneling that to advertisers, more or less.
That's right. I actually use a plugin on my browser. It's called Crystal, right? And you just plug it in, and it analyzes how people write through all their channels. So you could analyze someone writing a blog post, or someone writing in news, or what's most interesting, like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and it can actually do a personality test on them almost immediately. Wow. And what that lets you do is actually analyze how best to communicate with that person. And it's actually used as a sales tool, right? Or I just install these things just to see like the level of abstraction that you can take just from what we do.
Yeah, it's incredible. I know back in the day, I took this forensic science course a long time ago, and they said that they could actually tell figure out what a person actually looks like based on the methodology that serial killer would use to kill their victims and how they would do it. And they could actually describe the person physically based on methodology.
Yeah.
Now, can you imagine how far they can extrapolate the data they're getting from us on Facebook?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be hugely powerful as well. So I don't like to be the surveillance, the sponsored corporate surveillance, big brother, we should all be scared and run. I mean, we should also look at the huge benefits of this. I mean, all the dimensionality within these systems, if you take all of that data, think about what it can do for healthcare. Could you diagnose mental illness by how someone's speaking to each other on text on Facebook? I pretty much think that you'll be able to diagnose levels of depression and whatever. Pictures on Facebook, it's like, lots of people's pictures of people's faces, selfies, whatever. Right. Maybe you should get that mole checked out on your face, right? It's like this level of abstraction, artificial intelligence is sort of kicking in to actually, power the world. Google's working with the National Health Service in the UK. Facebook Health is going to probably kick back in the next couple of years and do something very interesting. There's some real power that's the goodness of the world. But again, they're brokering data. We're signing our lives away. When it comes to that level of personal information and personal impact, I think these companies are starting to be a lot more responsible about what to do, right?
Yeah, I heard an interesting podcast on Sam Harris about what technology is doing to us.
Yeah.
And he spoke, the one guy on there, his name was Tristan, can't remember his last name right now, but he was talking about how what they're doing now is they're almost gamifying social media.
Yeah.
So it's like when you log into your Twitter or your Instagram, and there's a little bit of a delay before they show you how many likes you have. So it's like you're waiting, and then boom, it shows you have 10 likes or whatever it is. And you actually get that little dopamine hit as if you were playing a slot machine. Yeah. So it kind of gets people checking more frequently to see how much engagement they're getting.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's really interesting. So I do these little experiments on myself as well, just to work out what's happening. Yeah. So I don't have any, I didn't have Facebook for a while, and I sort of checked out, and I got really worried about surveillance and whatever. I chatted to a few too many people that knew too much. But then sort of there was a lot of discussion and adjustment. And what's interesting, about 2 months ago, I was so busy, I was traveling so much. So I buy one of those phone cases that's an extra battery so my phone never runs out, right? That's already a level of anxiety. I sort of dealt with that. Then I turned on all of my alerts, right? So every single alert and all my platforms, just to see what would happen. Within a couple of months, I reached it, and I started reading news incessantly, right? Because what's happening in the US, what's happening in the UK, everything's gone crazy, whatever. And it actually caused me to have a bit of a nervous break. Not a full breakdown, but one night I was just at home. And I had a great weekend with my friends. All this was happening. It got super intense with travel. I was folding my clothes, and I had this deep sense of loneliness. It was very strange because it was like a Sunday afternoon and all the alerts were gone. So what had happened was all the kicking in of the serotonin and the dopamine and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's like a crash after cocaine, they say, right? The researchers say that, these viral loops and double viral loops, just like you were saying, that little delay, that gamification it basically stimulates neurotransmitters and sort of chemicals within the brain to form bond with other people. Right. And as soon as that bond drops, it's why we feel bad if we text someone with a lovely message and then we don't hear from them for a day and a half. We feel like crap, and it's not only emotionally; it's because the brain's kicked in a whole bunch of serotonin and dopamine, and then suddenly you're high, and then you're not high on that stuff.
Yeah,
right?
I think anybody who's been in a significant relationship and is communicating to that significant other via text can probably I know exactly what that feels like.
And I wrote a blog post about a year and a half ago about being crazy in love. And it's really interesting, when you do meet someone can overstimulate you so much that suddenly when you don't see them or they just step away a little bit, you're like, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's kind of interesting, yeah.
Can you speak to the idea on how, I've heard different things that Facebook actually plays around with, funny we're broadcasting on Facebook Live and we're talking about it like this, but they play around with people's news feeds and algorithms, and they'll show certain people different feeds, and they'll actually try to play with people's emotional states, and there's some sort of the accusations of manipulation going on there of individuals, just them testing different things to see if they can do that. Have you heard about that?
Yeah. So there's a few things that have happened around that. I don't know exactly what goes on within the algorithm. Obviously, that's proprietary inside Facebook.
Yeah.
Disclaimer. But the information that's sort of hit the news and the discussions that have been had, I think there was a couple of years ago, there was a piece of research that sort of came into the public, into the public world, and it wasn't supposed to be there, and it was from a university in the US that had been working with Facebook, and they'd been manipulating the mood of people, right, by promoting certain posts in there. And most recently, there was some controversy because they were colluding with someone else to look at depressed teenagers, and to push messages in front of those teenagers at certain points to sell product or gain opinion on whatever. So these algorithms and these changes and going beyond Facebook, going out into the wider world, algorithmic kind of advertising and all these things, they're just trying to tap into in your current mind state what's going to resonate with you the most. Because if you say something if they say something that you're looking for, then you're going to bond with that brand, or you're going to bond with that individual, right? I mean, the U.S. election and the current administration's campaign.
Yeah.
When they were running in the election, they did like hundreds, if not thousands, of micro-targeted campaigns to people.
Wow.
Just to hit into their their feeling on those particular days, right?
Wow.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, and coming back to like the human condition. People forget these technologists and the viral loops.
Well, you got to understand too. Like, I heard on that same podcast they were talking about how behind Facebook, on the other side of it, you have 1,000 software engineers that are figuring out how to keep people as engaged for as long as possible. The whole thing is like keeping people on the site as long as possible. Like, I think same guy said too, the average person's now pulling out their phone 150 times a day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that something like 95% of people with phones, like then the phone's never out of arm's reach, right? It's always there. It's omnipresent. I'm terrible for this.
Well, for me too, 24/7.
Yeah, I'm like, no, turn off. I'm trying to institute, like, I'm going on vacation, doing a big road trip. I want to turn off all my technology. It's making me hugely nervous. But like, that.
What if somebody says something about you and you don't know it?
Yeah. Well, I've been connected. I've been using computers since I was 10 years old. But like mobile technology, like drags me down into the world of like constant connection. What's happening? Who's emailing me? Maybe someone's asking me to do some work. Let's not miss that opportunity.
Right.
Yeah. And all that. Whereas before, it's like if someone wants to get a hold of you, they can work it out, right?
Yeah.
So it's hugely interesting, and it's not just software engineers. You got to remember that these software companies and these apps and platforms, they hire psychologists.
Totally.
So it's the psychologists that understand the human condition. They say, here's the insights about connection. Here's the insights about significance, connection, love. Here's the insights. Like these are the triggers that make people feel in certain ways. And software designers, product engineers are looking at this and they're like, how do we manifest that in a way? How do we remove friction from someone's life? So there's a guy, a really famous guy called Daniel Kahneman, who talked about fast and slow thinking. You probably come across this.
Yeah, I've heard of this before, but remind us.
So all of these, so it's the idea. So it's reflective and reflexive thinking. Reflexive thinking, which is fast thinking. You walk into a bakery. It's like, I want that cupcake. You buy the cupcake, you walk out. But if that process is sort of disrupted in a way, maybe there's a queue. You suddenly flip over from reflexive thinking to reflective thinking. You're like, oh, it's too many calories, and you start really rationalizing like why you're actually buying that. So like you walk into the empty bakery, you buy the cupcake, you start eating it, everything's good. You stop for a moment, then it's a problem. All of these software companies are making you use software that just completely promotes reflexive thinking, and you don't have to worry about it. So, for example, Amazon, it holds the patent on the button. You just press it once and you buy it, and you leave Amazon.com. Done. No time to think, no time to wonder. Now, come to 2017, Amazon's now like playing around with like the Internet of Things and big data, AI, and sensors and cameras, RFID and whatever, in their Amazon Go store, and they'd actually built one down in Seattle. They just did it for a trial period. But you would walk in, scan your app, go up to a shelf, take something off the shelf, put it in your bag, and you can walk out, and it's an automatic thing. So 1, you're going to pay more money for your shopping. 2, you're not going to have any guilt or any rationalization about everything. You might have that when you get home, but the bottom line is you've given all your money and all your data to Amazon. Like, rock on, right?
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah,
it's nutty. And like, I just, when you're talking, all I can think about is the Spider-Man quote that with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
And you just hope that, I don't know, that these people have some moral and ethical kind of thing. I mean, to a degree, I mean, there's so many people who aren't aware of this type of interaction that we have with these platforms and with, this whole element of technology. Like, like you said, they can start manipulating your mood based on what they're going to feed you in that algorithm on your newsfeed. Yeah,
I mean, the bottom line is this: like, we still have got the reason that they get away with these sorts of behaviors. It's like we're just creating a friction-free environment so your life's easy. Yes, I 100% support that, but at the same time, as individuals, we need to be hugely aware. The internet shouldn't be a magic box.
Right.
The internet should be hugely transparent about what they're doing, right? If, like, you're going to walk into this store, and if you walk into this store, we're going to be using this technology in a very specific way, and it's going to help you, but just be aware that this is happening. Would actually that sort of information would empower, the consumer to just have awareness around what's happening in the world, right? I mean, people still don't know that, the 7-Eleven stores in Canada, they've got the measuring stick in the corner, so it could capture criminals.
Right.
It also captures, it also takes pictures of people's faces, how they're feeling, their credit card information, what they just bought, and actually puts that into a database where you can analyze stock. And that's been happening for years, right? So we're in a world where people don't talk about their secret source. I try and talk about the secret source. Kids are getting sick. I mean, so kids using tablets. If anyone's listening to this and they've got young kids using tablets, stop. Honestly, stop. There was a woman came up to me at a conference 2 weeks ago, just out in the interior in BC, and it was all the local government administrations, and she said, you're talking about responsibility in devices, how kids' brain development can be affected by screens, and you can have a form of dementia by the age of 18 if you're a heavy user of screen time, right? Especially tablets and screens on laptops. And she came up to me, she told me a story about her friend's son at the age of 12 has got glaucoma.
Whoa. Yeah, I saw you make a post about that on Facebook, actually.
Right. And he's 12. He's 12. And it's like, they couldn't stop him from using the laptop because the kid's addicted to serotonin and dopamine, right? Yeah. You actually have to take the kids into therapy. You have to like remove them from the technology. Now, Steve Jobs is, hey, we've given you all this great stuff for the world. He's given people a platform for engagement. Engagement can be hugely powerful, but it can make us really dumb.
Totally.
So that's what I talk about. I really go into that in some great depth in pretty much every presentation. It's like, with all, Spider-Man quote, right?
Great
responsibility, absolutely.
Along those lines too, around AI, there's a lot of talk about, how do they negotiate things like moral dilemmas when you're driving a car.
Sure.
Like if you're going to run over 4 adults or hit one school children because this self-correcting, self-driving car one day has to make decisions like this, and how do you navigate those kind of morality questions? Very interesting.
Yeah, super. So ethicists are going to be hugely valuable for organizations. So they think that chief information officers are suddenly going to become chief artificial intelligence officers. They can have ethicists and people, psychologists trying to work out. Now, that particular thing you're talking about is called the trolley problem.
Yes.
It was actually discussed by philosophers and ethicists in the context of railways.
Yeah.
So you have a train track and you've got a siding. Now, on the siding, you've got a crew working there, and on the other train track, you've got a crew of 10 guys working there, and on the track ahead of you, you've got, say, a woman with her baby in a pram. And the train can't stop quickly. So you have to make a choice. Do you kill the 10 guys or the woman and the child? Now, everyone uses this example in the context of self-driving cars. Do you know what's going to happen with self-driving cars? The car's just going to stop. It's an ethical dilemma that doesn't apply to the modern world because it's proven that these cars they can stop in time, and they're all going to be networked, and you see tons of videos online of people's lives that have been saved by the autopilot feature of Tesla and whatever. So these ethical dilemmas, the whole landscape, it's like you need to think about the ethics of training data and breeding bias within AI systems more than those sort of bigger dilemmas, because just stopping a system and saving lives, it's going to be able to do that, and it's going to be able to predict situations going forward.
Yeah. So all right, on the AI train.
Yeah.
What are you fearful of artificial intelligence, or are you thinking that's going to enhance humanity in some way? Like, what's your school of thought on that?
Yeah, so there's two things here, right? So artificial intelligence can machine learning. It can take data sets, like huge trillions of lines of data. It can chuck through that and really work out what's going on at a higher degree of accuracy than humans. And it can really, through algorithmic learning, machine learning, or whatever, neural networks, it can really work out how to do things better than we can. So, for example, JP Morgan have got a system called Coin that does a whole bunch of contract processing and negotiations. When they turned it on, they removed 360,000 hours of manpower needed to do the job of processing contracts and negotiations. So that's lawyers and back end, back office administration staff.
So and say goodbye to jobs, basically.
Certain jobs.
Certain jobs.
So some people are saying it's not the end of jobs, it's the end of occupations. And what's actually happening is the things that can be algorithmically replaced will be replaced. And we're going to just move into a different world. Now, the flip side of artificial intelligence is what some people are calling intelligence amplification. So there's going to be this change. We're going to be people that work with these systems, and these systems are going to make us smarter and better and enable us to do more. What we'll be able to do is add a level of human sensibility into the system. And some people talk about human and the machine. I talk about human in the machine, because there's still levels of humanity that need to be within that. Now, there's lots of things that are just going to do whatever they're doing on their own. Self-driving trucks, self-driving cars, these stores like I was talking about earlier, we're not going to need people there. But do you know what? At school, do you really want to train to go flipping burgers? Do you want to go and train to work in a retail outlet?
No.
I mean, lots of people do.
Yeah.
I think it's been an excuse for a lot of people not to work hard at school or to not step up themselves. I've had a journalist most recently ask me if I was like working class or middle class, because I was making these assertions about retraining. And I grew up in a very sort of meager household. My parents were awesome. I grew up in a council estate in England, and I left school with nothing. It didn't suit me. Like, school wasn't my bag, right? I don't think like that.
Yeah.
And I was basically I was a carpenter, and I was a milkman for the first 3 years of my career, and it was a complete dead end job. And luckily, my parents you can do more than this, and it was like, I'm going to do computers.
I've heard arguments along those lines that like there's a certain level of intelligence that people require to say do work in any kind of tech field that it's just not out there. Like if you look at just average intelligence, that's even not enough to work in like technology fields. So it's like, all the jobs that people of lower intelligence would normally do are going to be wiped out. So you're going to have this population of people who really have trouble finding work. Yeah. So then they start talking about things like universal basic income and that kind of thing.
I struggle with the idea of lower intelligence. I think it's around motivation. There might be some people in the world that a brain injury might cause like lower cognitive function. There might be like levels of intelligence, quotient, right? IQ.
Right.
You know what? We can change how we are. And the biggest companies in the world, some people are saying, will be educational institutions. My friend Thomas Frey, very well-known futurist down in Colorado, he says like the world's largest company doesn't exist today, but in 30 years' time it will be an educational company, because people will be able to step up. People will be able to do more. I think we've actually we've grown up in a society where there's been a lot of people actually telling kids what they can't do. Right.
Right.
Yeah. I saw it all the way through going to school.
And limiting self-beliefs.
That's right, limiting self-beliefs. What can you do? creative fields are going to become like more important. Artisanal occupationals, we're going to have humans in the mix in a much more vibrant and exciting way. Information economies and the communities are going to come alive again, I think, because we're going to have a bit more free time and a little bit less stress, right?
Yes, and that's definitely the optimistic point of view for sure.
Yeah, and more businesses. So with all of this technology, people are going to spin out more businesses doing whatever they need, and they're going to have a tool set available to them to, either to be an information worker, or maybe they're a craftsman and whatever. And I think humanity is going to value what we do as humans a lot more. Right. I think that we're kind of in this sort of grey world right now where, who made this table like in your living room? And people don't know whether it was a human that made it or whether it was just a human that threw it through a machine and sort of bolted it together, right? But like people understand the beauty in the world and the value of that craft, right?
I've been listening to a lot of Sam Harris lately, so that's why these questions are coming out.
It's all good, man. Like keep going.
Yeah.
I mean that's it, and I think it's really important. So intelligence amplification, I think, is going to be the preeminent use of artificial intelligence, big data, and sort of humans. People are going to work with lots of contracts over time. They're going to change their jobs every 3 to 5 years. That's what I've been doing anyway. I just didn't realize it was that like trend that was coming. I just realized that as the world changes, people are going to change. And do you know what? What's going to happen to all the truck drivers that are going to no longer be driving trucks? Well, they're going to move into logistics, or they're going to move into road planning, city planning. Imagine the insights from someone that's been driving for 30 years. Like, imagine how they could feed into the system in a much more valuable way. So administrations and governments, large companies, need to realize that we can bring these people in. Design thinking is about building thinking on top of thinking from people that don't work in the field that you work in. Designers are useless on their own. They need the people out in the field. They need the people with the experience.
So you're not worried about the Terminator?
You know what? Like, it's interesting. I mean, one of the very first jobs I was interviewed for back in... it was, when did I graduate? 96. 97, 98, I was down in the south of England. And I was interviewed for a job programming an AI language called Ada. I did AI at university. Programming Polaris missiles. And I said, no, thank you. Because I found it a bit heinous to work on missile systems. But like Terminator, robotics, I don't know, autonomous systems that are going to come and kill humans. I mean, humans kill humans. Right. Like humans will put the intent into anything. It's like guns don't kill people, humans do, right? It's a similar thing. I mean, these autonomous systems, there's actually some campaigns around the world. The campaign to stop killer robots is one of them. Lots of the world's like greatest thinkers on AI and ethics. And
you see those DARPA videos, though, you get thinking, like, that thing looks scary as hell.
Yeah. I mean,
they do, man.
Yeah, they're still a way away, but like, could you build something to do recognition of certain people, send them out into the field, and make the decision to unleash your missile on people?
Probably.
Well, right now that's a human decision, right?
Yeah.
Now, the campaign to stop killer robots is about ensuring that there's an ethical framework and a discussion at a very senior international level to stop that from ever happening. Could you use AI to determine a risky situation on the ground, say in a warfare situation, and make a decision? Sure, absolutely. But the ethical, moral standpoint behind that is that currently someone has to take responsibility for that, and they're not willing to do that unless they make the human judgment, right?
Totally.
So
there's this really interesting movie on Netflix called I think it's called Ex Machina or something like that. And it's basically, the idea is this guy runs one of the biggest world search engines.
The Blue Book, I think.
Yes, and it's kind of around the idea of Google.
Yeah.
And they're basically analyzing all this data of people's search engine history and everything like that.
Yeah.
And they're using that to formulate what artificial intelligence is going to be. Have you heard anything about that along those lines, or is that just science fiction?
This is about sentience and awareness, right? So Ex Machina, Ex Machina, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
It's an amazing movie. I watched it many times. I've watched lots of movies like this over the time. You can even go to like Westworld and what's going on there.
Yeah.
You can go back and look at everything from Metropolis way back in the day. Sentience is something that people talk a lot about with artificial intelligence. It's like, can you define what consciousness is? It's always been the biggest debate in psychology, right? Daniel Kahneman, people like that have speculated hugely about this. Can you reduce it down to ones and zeros? Can we download consciousness? That sort of ethical, moral dilemma framework that we can have, can we encode that? Lots of people have been working on that for years. It's a hugely difficult, fuzzy field. And there's so many extraneous factors we can't really work it out. So when you got movies like Ex Machina and it's like Sentience, it's like, can the machine fool you to think that you're in love with it? And then can it use that to manipulate you to do whatever, which is kind of what happens in the movie a little bit. Sorry for the spoiler. But, that sentience, I mean, what's the value of sentience, right? To actually have something that's ostensibly alive and has an understanding about the world and has a feeling and maybe grows with you. So you might be born with an AI that grows with you and understands you and shares that, and it's your educational assistant and friend through the whole of your life, helps you out in work. Seems like a completely sensible application of something in the future. Right. So when AI gets powerful enough, people talk about general AI and an AI that can do multiple different things better than humans. Will it supersede us? Well, we're going to supersede ourselves with it, right? Those dilemmas and those ethical sort of boundaries are discussed a lot because we're worried that a machine is going to do to us what other humans do to us, which is a pretty heavy idea, right?
Totally. Man, crazy.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about how you mentioned that the biggest company in the world is going to be this education company.
Yeah.
Right? Now, so I'm kind of jumping back to that because I had this question lingering, but do you see that now in education in terms of how people can use technology in this relationship, or do you see it more of a personal development type thing, or all of the above?
Yeah, I think it's going to be there's going to be lots of different lines of this. I think the dynamics of education to this point have been a little strange, right? Here's a subject, learn the subject verbatim, learn the methods of the subject verbatim, do this exam, you're now qualified for that subject. I don't do exams very well. I don't work like that. When I was at university and when I was at school, it was the practical doing, constant application and discussion that was the thing where I learned, right?
Right.
Exams, I think I just had a mental block on exams, right?
Right.
Learning lists of dates and names and whatever just didn't make sense to me. I mean, that's not how you operate in the real world. I think what you're going to have, as we all know, and I follow what you guys are doing and the wider discussions in the world, some of the biggest growth that I've had in the last few years that's underpinned my sort of career path has been a lot of personal growth.
Yeah.
And personal growth and exploration and journeying with very talented and experienced people has been the thing that sort of leveled me up more than anything else. But I mean, it's great. I mean, if you think about that spiritual growth, the age of spiritual machines, spiritual approaches to technology, it's been the underpinning of technology as a whole. So, for example, Sir Francis Crick in the 1950s discovered the DNA helix, right? He's one of the three people, Nobel Prize. He envisaged it whilst on LSD, and his wife actually drew a picture of what he saw, which was the DNA double helix, right?
Right.
Douglas Engelbart, the guy who came up with the first personal computer in Stanford in 1968, did something called the mother of all demos. It was like the inventor of the mouse, the trackpad, the desktop publishing system, right? Why were they better in Stanford than the East Coast, where there were better computer engineers? The counterculture, right? Steve Jobs. Why did he think about empathy and font and feeling when he came up with the Macintosh? Because he had a deeper spiritual awareness, right? I remember seeing in Gastown a couple of years ago. I talk about this story. I saw someone carrying one of the big Macs, the big desktop Macs, into the office. And back in the day, I remember you'd have some guy with a big trolley full of monitors and computers, dragging it over cobblestones, and he wouldn't care. This was wrapped in a blanket. He was carrying it like a baby. Right. So this is it. The connection to product and whatever over time. But if we think about that and coming back to your question about education, it's the education is kids at school aren't taught about spiritual growth. necessarily, right? And they're not taught about self-reflection or meditation or any of these things that could be hugely valuable for them. So I think we're actually going to progress, I hope, into a world where that happens. Could that be potentially supported by technology? Absolutely. There's already technologies that support us with meditation, for example, today or whatever. Yep. Are we going to actually have to see communities rallying together, experts that are experts not only in the technologies that we're surrounded by, but the ethical application of them and the spiritual application of them as well? Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a lot of stigma around some of those things that what you just said. Luckily, some of it is now being broken through the medicalization model of these things, right? Rick Doblin said it very well. It's like legalization follows medicalization typically. Yeah. Right. You're removing that stigma and be like, oh, these things actually can be useful. Now, how do you see those type of substances, or maybe meditation, or any of those practices, how do you see them actually changing people?
I think it's, that's a tough question, right? So I think it's about context. I think there's a lot of control in the world, and there's a lot of choice that we make in the world around context of how we apply things. I think any method, whether it's like doing some online learning, whether doing meditation as an example, it needs to have a context, or I think you've probably heard of like set and setting as well, right?
Totally.
Set and setting is going to be hugely important for technology as well as for meditation practices. I think family units are going to become more interesting, like human independence is going to become more interesting ahead, how we bind ourselves together. I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question here. It's tough, but like
it's hard to say how they change people.
Yeah,
it really is. But they do.
Yeah.
I mean, like that was kind of the underpinnings of what happened in the entire '60s, right?
Yeah.
With Timothy Leary starting that whole thing off in that movement. I mean, look what it did to a whole population, which you can argue is the motivation for the war on drugs and all of that, right?
Yeah. Well, there's lots of terrible decisions that have been made because of political motivations, right? Actually, are we going to head towards a world that's more liberal and more open? Well, it's not going that way right now, right? Right. And it's like, should we head towards that world as well, that's a little bit more open-minded? It's a tough journey because the moral majority, the people in charge, think that they've got a responsibility to keep the world as straight as possible.
Yeah, and tapping into that topic before we wrap up here, but like, how do you see potential outcomes of like politics and nations and like and like the whole concept of globalization?
Yeah.
What do you see in that realm? Do you see things amalgamating more? Do you see things getting more separatist, or what do you think?
It's interesting. I always go back to historical perspective, right?
Right.
The Genghis Khan tried to take as much as he could, right? Was it they say about 10% of the world's population is directly related to Genghis Khan?
Something like that. Yeah.
Like the Roman Empire. A lot of it was about land grab. And ultimately, those land grabs were to destroy borders and try and centralize a power and a philosophy, right? If we look at the world today, it's basically built on war and taxation. And all the borders are around that, and it's difficult. Immigration and those discussions are so intense right now because, every time you try and create some free flow in the world, it becomes really intense. I grew up in England, part of the European Union, soon not to be, which, I won't share my opinion on that, but it'll become quite clear. But like, I'm all about free movement of people around. The trouble is that there are some people that don't see the benefits of that. Could we drop all the borders in the world, and what would that world look like? Well, there'd be migrations from certain places that aren't as abundant into places where they are as abundant. So Canada, the US, the UK, whatever. And I don't actually mind that too much, but there does need to be some controls around working out how those dynamics change. There's only so much land mass that you can fit people into, right?
Yeah.
But what's been found is diversity in the change actually leads to a much better, a more dynamic world. For example, like some of the greatest inventors in the world, like came from Persia and Italy, and they didn't stay in Persia and Italy. They like traveled the world, and China. They shared everything, and I think that's where we have to head towards. This is where technology, I think, can take us into like online forums, like global forums, where we can have these really deep discussions. The World Economic Forum, Davos, all these things are incredibly important, even though they seem very exclusive. They're actually quite democratic in a way in terms of getting that mind share out there into the influences that can change the dynamics of even borders, right? And then you've got the moral majority that try and close everything down and protect themselves, but they're only trying to protect the next 5 to 10 years, and they don't see out like 30, 40, 50 years, right?
When you say moral majority, does that refer to people like in the whole extreme political correctness realm?
Yes.
Is it referring to that?
Yeah, I'm talking about the old white guys. But it's sort of like it's literally like the people that have taken it onto their shoulders to like say what's right and what's wrong. Whereas I think that true democracy is to take inputs from a lot of people all of the time, not every 4 years with an election or whatever, right? I mean, and this is a new way that even the World Economic Forum, United Nations, everyone's saying it's like constant communication, open data, like a complete cyclical conversation. That's constant optimization of the people within the system, right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Crazy.
Yeah. Nanotech.
Yes.
What about it? What can you talk about nanotech?
Okay.
Where's that going?
Yeah. So I do work with the University of Waterloo, and I was there earlier this year, and I chatted to Edward Snowden on stage. That was pretty crazy. I chatted to a whole bunch of people, quantum computing, nanotech, went to their nanotech center. Nanotechnology is super interesting to me. You have to have a really diverse amount of different kinds of scientists, like social scientists, material scientists, biologists, and everyone looking at this technology. We're down to like 4 nanometers, which is tiny, tiny, tiny. We can build very small analog machines that can deliver potentially drug payloads to cancers or whatever in our bodies, right? I actually think that nanotechnology is going to be incredibly powerful, from material science to having buildings that don't break anymore. They self-heal. You've already got technology like that. New materials that are more water resistant than ever before, or fire retardant, or stronger and lighter. Screens that are completely transparent and will never ever just break as a standard thing. This nanotechnology is something I don't know a huge depth of information on. I was taken on a tour of the nanotechnology labs at the University of Waterloo, and boy, they're really working hard to work out the application of some of this incredible technology. Imagine if every single body in the world had like 10,000 nanobots within it that actually help maintain a level of health, or they actually do. They actually go around and they fix cells, anti-aging. It could lead us in so many different directions.
How far away is that, do you think?
15, 20 years. Like to a level of ability. Yeah, I mean, people like Kurzweil says it's a lot closer. But actual application of nanotechnology in a very practical sense, certainly affecting humans and the human body. Yeah, 15, 20 years.
Wow.
So you think they'll be able to do things that would require surgery now, like knee surgery or back surgery, could potentially be done with nanotechnology in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be very cool.
Yes, I mean, this is where we're going. The realms of possibility. I get into trouble when I say things like this and give these predictions. But the people that the people I talk to and just see the opportunity, exponential growth. 4 nanometers this year, 2 nanometers next year, 1 nanometer the following year. But then each of those abstractions working out the practical abilities.
Wow.
It's just incredible. And it's just like, the Fantastic Six I was talking about,
right? Which
was like, we didn't get to the others, but big data, AI, Internet of Things, additive manufacturing, renewable energy, and gene editing. All of those things got to a point from research, academia, whatever. Things like nanotechnology, quantum computing, and everything is going to come out of the labs in the next few years, and it's going to be applied from a practical perspective by commercial companies, and it's going to change everything.
Ray Kurzweil.
Yeah.
So he talks about the singularity.
Yeah.
Right? He says there's something going to be like nanotech across the entire universe, and eventually it's all relaying information, and that becomes a singularity. What are your thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, I mean, singularity is the idea that you get to a point. I think it's around 2045 or so, where you get to a point where machine intelligence surpasses human intelligence, but not just one person, all the human intelligence in the world. That's the idea. It's the idea that we meld as man and machine, and suddenly we end up in this transhuman cyborg reality. Now, there's lots of people that are pushing us towards that. There's a lot of criticisms around the singularity. People say that the world, the more things that we solve, the more questions arise. So do we ever reach that point of singularity, right? Does understanding ever stop? I think the singularity can get to a point where it's like we know enough to get to this mind state. I think that it's not that simple. And it's a heavy discussion.
Totally.
Yeah. I met Ray Kurzweil last year. He's a brilliant man. Honestly, yeah. He's a brilliant
genius
man.
Level kind of guy.
Yeah, he's been an inventor since he was a young teenager.
Cool.
He's invented optical character recognition systems. He worked with Stevie Wonder on the Kurzweil sort of synthesizers to create some of the realist orchestral sounds or whatever that there was. He's just brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant, but controversial.
Yeah, totally. So, next big question, jumping to another genius. Are we going to Mars?
So why did we go into space, and why did we go to the moon? That was because of the Cold War, right? And there was a lot of there was the power struggle between the US and Russia. What came out of it is more interesting to me. The invention of a number of different technologies came out of it. Everything as simple as Velcro. To freeze-dried food, down to some jet propulsion, materials science and whatever came out from those kinds of endeavors. Now, should we leave this planet and go and find other planets to go and live on? Sure, I don't mind that as an idea. Should we go to Mars? I'm not a huge fan of the idea. I mean, it's like
I don't want to go.
Who wants to live there, right? I actually met someone about 3 or 4 weeks ago that's on the short list for people to go to Mars, right?
Man.
And it was a lot of this is dream big and think differently. Imagine how many technological progressions we can make by trying to design rockets and all the systems that we need to take us to Mars. So my Fantastic Six, you can put them all in a spaceship with a bunch of people and build an entire new civilization. Now, is Mars a great place to live? I think it'd be a terrible place to live.
Yeah,
it's got it might have an abundance of certain natural resources, but it doesn't have what we need to survive. Now, would there be research teams? Sure. Will it be one-way tickets for average civilized humans? I think that's a little bit in the realms of science fiction. Will Elon Musk eventually get fired off to spend his final days on Mars? Hey, who knows? He's an interesting cat anyway, right?
Do you think, in terms of what we know about the environment and pollution and everything that's going on right now, are we going to be able to turn it around quickly enough to catch this before it gets out of control? Or what's your prediction there?
Yeah, I mean, this is really tough. I mean, You've got some governments in the world that are very progressive. Even this week, China is still behind the Paris climate agreement. You've got the US pushing against that. You've got Canada that were really late to the game, to that discussion, right? I think we all need to make a step change forward. I think I talk about the end of oil-based economies a lot. It gets me into trouble in Canada when I go to places like Alberta. But we're going to stop burning fossil fuels. That's going to be the one thing that's going to come. China's going to lead that charge. North America's dragging behind, but a lot of people in Europe. I think Germany's electricity. I think Germany's power is 85% renewables now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's about 66% renewables for Canada as well. So we're getting there, but we're still burning fuel on the streets.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, around 2023, electric vehicles are going to be at parity with combustion engine vehicles. People
for cost, you mean?
For the cost.
Nice.
So
that's huge.
Yeah. Well, what's even huger is the Tesla 3. They've sold 400,000 cars that are going to hit the road 2020, 2021. We're going to have to generate electricity cleaner and more cheaply. We're going to have the streets lined with electric vehicle charging stations. I actually think that there's going to be a tipping point. There's some really great thinkers in this area. By 2030, they think that the oil economy from a transportation perspective is going to be completely decimated and replaced by electric vehicles. And the electricity is going to be generated from solar, from wind, from hydro. And I'm the most excited about this one particular area because I think that it's going to give us an opportunity to try and straighten out the world. These climate change deniers, seriously, removing scientists off of the EPA in the States and replacing it with people from industry. That's insanity to me.
Right? Yeah, you just said today. He's like, it's insane.
It's absolute insane. I almost need to stop reading the news.
Yeah,
and I never really want to be that guy, but seriously.
Wow.
Do you think what's going on in the political landscape and the fact that that's what they're doing?
Yeah.
Is it reversible? Are they listening? Do they care what people think? What's going on there?
I think if we look at the world powers and how they have conversations, I think people are going to put pressures onto certain countries to take action. I think that's been happening for years and years and years. And it's tough. We've created an infrastructure that's incredibly damaging to the world, and it's going to take decades to change that. But I think with the right kinds of people making the right kinds of decisions, we'll get there. I think even the people making the wrong decisions today, I think they're going to feel very silly in 5 years' time. And
yeah,
I don't think anyone likes to feel that stupid.
Yeah, right? I like the saying. I'm not sure where we originally heard it, but it's being on the right side of history.
Yeah,
and just green tech and that whole movement. It's yeah, duh, of course.
Yeah,
right?
What's the legacy, right?
Right.
What's the legacy that we're going to leave our children? There's still a lot of people. It's buy your big truck. Buy your snowmobile, buy your boat, everything,
right.
Yeah. In certain parts of Canada, even that's a philosophy, and it's because there's an abundance of money, or that it's go out and create wealth and prosperity. Wealth and prosperity in the modern world is around the strength of the retail economy, which is insane to me as well. I actually think we're seeing a huge downturn in retail because people are doubling back into what's important in their lives, and I think that's going to have a knock-on effect with how people purchase vehicles or travel in the world. I've got a great friend of mine. He just sold his BMW and just bought a Fiat 500e, imported it from the States. Never has to pay for gas ever again in his life, and he loves it. It's there's almost no moving parts in an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
So all of these things, like almost free power, no moving parts. The vehicle's going to be, the average age of a combustion engine vehicle is about 12, 13 years right now. Electric vehicles are going to be 30, 40 years. Wow. And you're just going to swap out the batteries once every sort of 10 years or so.
Cool.
So are you optimistic about the future or pessimistic?
I'm hugely optimistic. I have to be optimistic. There's no place for me to sort of stand up there and be the harbinger of doom. I'm sort of the guy that still says we need to stop and we need to pay attention to the things that are potentially damaging. And, as we've got more connection to the world, more data, it's going to have this effect on humanity. Here's the security and privacy implications. These are the things we have to think about, rules and regulations. I actually do this a lot. I met with a lot of the regulators in Ontario a couple of weeks ago, and they just want to do right by the world, and they want all of us to operate in a way that keeps us safe and actually helps us progress. And that takes optimism that people are going to make the right choices, but that you're actually going to add regulation and consideration from a government perspective in the right kinds of way.
Well done, Nikolas Badminton. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's a constant. I read and write every day. I chat to lots of people. These discussions enrich what I do. But the one thing that resonates in everything that I talk about is coming back to what it means to be human, because it becomes opaque as we throw more technology onto our lives, right?
Right. Absolutely. Cool. Well said. Great last words.
I feel like we could keep going, but
I know.
it leaves room for a second.
The surface. That's the thing. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll have you on for round 2.
Yeah, we can do that.
Cool. People, Nikolas Futurist, at Nikolas Futurist, it's Nikolas Futurist, Futurist. So connect with him on social. Check out, what's your website?
Yeah, so nikolasbadminton.com.
Awesome.
I write lots there. Nikolas Futurist is my Twitter handle.
Okay.
You can type in my name, Nikolas Badminton. You'll find me all over the internet,
Beautiful.
YouTube, whatever. There's tons of my talks, tons of my presentations. You can contact me, nick@nikolasbadminton.com. Like, happy to have conversations.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing. I think it was super valuable, very interesting stuff. And, I love it when people can come and shake up the snow globe of our lives and be like, fuck yeah, I got to think about that a little bit. That's interesting stuff. Because like we can get, we can miss these things. So awesome work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Anything departing words, Andy?
Yeah, just remember to come out to the Vancouver Real meetups every single month. Go to the community page under the community tab, and you can look at all the upcoming events on there. And if you like what you heard today, of course, leaving a review and a rating on iTunes or Stitcher and YouTube is very helpful. And, like and share and tag your friends and all that good stuff. So thank you very much for listening. Really appreciate everyone who tunes in on a regular basis, and look forward to connecting with you more in the future.
Absolutely. Until next time.
To whatever is.
To whatever is.